All right. Good morning, Marlins fans. Welcome to another episode of the Marlins Prospects Pod. My name is David Fernandez. I'm here, as always, with Joe Frisaro from manon2nd.com. We're coming to you on the 5 Reasons Sports Network YouTube channel, and we're here to talk about some of the names that we think might help the Marlins during their playoff push, because if you're watching Marlins baseball right now, you have to be really, really excited with the product that they're putting on the field. They've won 6 in a row. They've climbed their way back into this wild card race. We saw another masterclass from Sandy Alcantara yesterday, and the Marlins have a chance to sweep the Angels with a win today and move on to a very important series in New York against the Mets before dealing with the Phillies, and we've got the All-Star break right around the corner. But here to talk about what prospects we might see help the Marlins during this playoff push, we're going to get into it with Joe. How you doing today, Joe?
I'm doing great, David. Yeah, it's exciting because about a week or so ago, we thought it could go the other way because they're teetering. They were 7 under. You know, if they had fallen to about 10 under, we would have a different podcast. But
Yeah.
I can tell you what I know before we mention specific names because people are going to be curious. Are they going to buy? Are they going to sell? Let me put it this way. They will look to improve. They are being kind of, I use the term cautious buyers right now. Their focus seems to be immediate is bullpen. I know people say get another bat or two, but they're also paying close attention to, you got Jazz who's hurt. You've got, Soler's on the IL as well. John Birdie's legs are a little beaten up. And so they're that could change things. So people will say, oh, they need a bat, they need this. Well, if one of those guys goes down for a little bit longer, well, next thing you know, they may need infield depth. Right. Or, so for all the people who just say, oh, go get a center fielder, that's not necessarily where they are. They're looking to kind of patch up what they have there. But we're going to focus on the bullpen and arms that could help, whether it's spot start rotation. So we're going to spend some time. There's some interesting lefties, and we're going to keep this podcast, everybody, kind of in the lane of, we're not talking about who we think's their best young lefty reliever prospect. We're talking about the prospects that could help the Miami Marlins in 2022 as they get closer to the trade deadline, and who could kind of come up and help the big league club this year. And let's start, with the big name, because everyone's waiting. When's the time for Max Meyer? And I think, David, for me personally, his clock could be a little different because he's in the starter lane. Unless there's a true need for a starter, they will, in my opinion, they will continue to be cautious with Max Meyer and kind of ride this rather than speed him up. But tell us what you know about Max, how he's looked, since he's come back from the IL.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. I mean, Max Meyer, we've talked about him so many times, as in the run of our podcast here, episode 11. I think we've definitely touched on him in more than half of the episodes in which we've kind of gone through, and he has bounced back from his injury in a really, really positive way. So his last start was on Sunday, July the 3rd. He went 6 innings in that one. He gave up 2 hits. He struck out 5. He threw 61 pitches total. 44 of those went for strikes. He was going against the Memphis Redbirds, which is the AAA affiliate for the St. Louis Cardinals, and they have one of the best offenses in the International League. So this wasn't just a joke lineup that he was going against, and this was actually the second time in that series that he had seen the Redbirds, so they were familiar with him. It wasn't like he was catching them off guard or anything like that. And he was relatively sharp. He was efficient with his pitches. He came out of the game after 6 innings. He probably could have gone further, right? 61 pitches. You'd like to see him stretched out a little bit more. In the start previous to that one, he had gone 71 pitches. So it was a little curious as to why they pulled him early. But he's looked really, really good here as he's worked his way back into the rotation for Jacksonville. And he's kind of on the cusp of the call-up at this point. There was an interesting stat posted by Fish Stripes. On a hat tip over to Fish Stripes. He's made 11 starts this season, Meyer has. 9 of those starts, they identified 9 of those starts as being non-impacted by injury. He went on the injured list with an ulnar nerve irritation, which was really affecting his mechanics. And if you look back at sort of his game logs, you'll see that there was a spot there right before he went on the IL where things just went haywire for Meyer. And it had a lot to do with that injury because he was changing the grip and he was changing his setup. So in the 9 games that were not impacted by that injury, Fish Stripes identified these stats, that he has a 1.60 ERA. He's got 53 strikeouts in 45 innings pitched. For the season, he's 3-3 with Jacksonville with a 3.67 ERA. He's got an 0.94 whip, which is awesome. He's got 62 strikeouts, 56 and a third innings pitched total. He leads all of minor league baseball in strikeouts since the start of 2021 with 192. He's been really, really, really good. And I know that you mentioned he could just sort of, they've always treated him as a starter, but you look at the starting rotation, they seem to have things at least stabilized for now. There was some thought like if Braxton Garrett couldn't handle it or Daniel Castano couldn't handle it, then maybe Meyer gets the call. But the reality is both of those guys have pitched pretty well, Castano particularly of late. But Meyer can maybe grab one or either of those spots if the need arises. And the reality is there's not a ton that he has left to prove at the AAA level. So it's pretty much a matter of time.
Yeah, I kind of think that time, though, is going to come in no earlier than August. That's just kind of a hunch. And that might be fine because, we're getting very close to the 81 games, which is obviously the halfway point of the big league season. So there's still a half the season to go. And, I know people are impatient. They've been highly patient with Max. And he may be an answer in August, September, based on being, the downtime, assuming he stays healthy and builds back up. The missed time may actually work to his benefit to help the late season push, assuming that they still are hanging around. So I kind of still think he's a little bit of ways away, David. They may surprise me if they go the other way, but I kind of think they're going to run with those, Cody Poteet's coming back from injury, building up Sixto Sanchez. These guys could also figure into that, but we'll stay with Max. I still say I don't think that they're going to, whatever plan they have on Max, and it seems to have been consistent that it's a patient one. Yeah. I don't think they're going to accelerate it based on one or two bad Braxton Garrett or Daniel Castano starts. It's just kind of my reading the tea leaves of where they're going. But clearly, a guy that's, like you say, knocking on the door that doesn't have much more to prove, but get him as sharp as possible, as built up as possible. And again, we might be, August 15th or whatever, looking at Max Meyer coming in and, being a big part of them trying to stay in that mix.
Yeah, there was some thought earlier in the year that the Marlins were maybe waiting for the Super 2 deadline, but that's long since passed. It's pretty clear that they have a very specific plan in place for him and his development. He might have been pulled early the other day, and I say early, he went 6 innings, but he might have been pulled early after 61 pitches because he was on, regular rest, right? So he was pitching after 4 days of rest on the 5th day, but now for his next start, he's scheduled to start on Saturday against Norfolk, the Orioles AAA affiliate, at home in Jacksonville. So if he makes that start, he would have had 6 days of rest at that point. So it'll be interesting to see if they kind of stretch him out a little bit further. I mean, the fastball velocity is there. It's great. The slider remains elite. We know that. And the changeup is becoming a much more consistent offering at this point. So it's exciting to see his development, and, if it's end of July, if it's August, I do think at some point they're going to call him up, even if it's just like a September call up at the end of the year to give him a taste. We will see him at some point. I'm pretty sure. Now, a guy that we've already seen, who's currently Max Meyer's teammate, who might actually get a call maybe before Meyer if the team is being overly cautious, is Eliezer Hernandez. Bringing him up because obviously he's on the 40-man roster, and when you're kind of juggling things around with the roster, we know that the Marlins have had issues. We call them issues. They wouldn't call them that, but we question some of their 40-man roster manipulations in the past. But Hernandez is on the 40-man, and he's actually pitched pretty well. His last 3 starts, he's gone 15 and 2/3 innings. He's only given up 2 earned runs, 4 runs total. He's got a 1.18 ERA. He's got 25 strikeouts, 6 walks. He hit a batter, and most importantly, he has not given up a home run in his last 3 starts. His last start, which was on July 4th for the Jumbo Shrimp, he went 5 innings, no earned runs. He had 9 strikeouts. He was really, really sharp in that one. He's scheduled to go again this coming Sunday. For the season with Jacksonville at the AAA level, he's 3-1 with a 2.77 ERA, a 1.12 WHIP, 37 strikeouts, and 26 innings pitched. He gave up 3 home runs. Those came in his first 2 starts of his turn with Jacksonville. Obviously, we saw his struggles with the Marlins earlier this year. He went 2-5 with a 6.75 ERA, a 1.44 WHIP. He did have 47 strikeouts in 48 innings, but at the time that he was sent to Jacksonville, he led the league in home runs given up. He had given up 18 homers. He's since been passed in that category by Red starter Hunter Green, who's had a little bit of an issue giving up home runs lately. But Hernandez is a guy that everybody kind of cast aside after his struggles, but he's somebody that if the Marlins need an arm, he's been in the majors. We've seen him have success with the Marlins in the past. He might be the next call-up. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with Eliezer, and I'm a fan of his, I know what he is. He's not a front line. He's a back end starter / long reliever to me.
Right.
And the kid's got a ton of toughness. But what I noticed kind of right before he got sent down, you could see the confidence dripping away. And Donnie even mentioned that. And when you have that look like you can't get a guy out and you feel the pressure of you better perform, it's not it kind of made it an easy decision to send him down. Yeah. It's encouraging that he's finding that. So I think with Eliezer, we know he's going to give up home runs because he throws strikes, he pitches at the top of the zone, and he doesn't have overpowering fastball or anything. Right. So he's going to give up home runs. I think that number got kind of just made it such a big issue. You obviously don't want to give up the 3-run homer. You could give up the one home run in 3 innings, and that's the only run you give up. You can live with that. With him, it kind of all compounded. I feel if his confidence is back and he looks like he has a chip on his shoulder again and he could attack the zone and be confident the ball's going to stay in the ballpark, he very well could have a role because, like I said, they're looking for bullpen arms. And you got to keep this in mind, too. Sandy Alcantara is doing an unbelievable job. You know, he's over 120 innings, I believe. But to think that you're going to go 7, 8, 9 and 7 with Pablo as well, or 7 with Brax, it's very difficult, especially as the year goes on. So there's going to be attrition. And Eliezer, and when I say this, he'll be up. I agree with you. I think he will get a call, but he may be up in a specific long relief role, pick up the pieces. If they make a move off of their current big league roster, which is possible, they could trade a reliever or 2 on the current roster and replace them with people in their system or a trade piece. And if Eliezer comes up or whatever, he could also still be included in the trade package. So everything that he's showing is encouraging, but for me, it's confidence, David.
Right. Yeah. And as you said, we're starting to see that confidence as he's sort of finding his rhythm in Jacksonville. He's scheduled to start on Sunday against Norfolk. So it'll be interesting to see if or how he pitches in that one. Obviously, again, he's a valuable piece for the Marlins, currently on the 40-man roster, and he could be a swing piece in that bullpen, long reliever, spot starter, maybe a piggyback guy, which we've talked about in the past with some of these arms. If they really want to maybe call up Meyer, but be careful with him, maybe they piggyback him with Meyer or with Garrett or some of these other guys. So it'll be interesting to see what they do in that regard. Now, you mentioned trades and you mentioned the bullpen specifically. The Marlins have some arms in their bullpen right now that teams are calling on. Teams are looking at guys like Anthony Bass, who's pitching really, really well. Teams are looking at guys like Stephen O'Kurt, who's, pitched well for most of the season. Some of the other arms back there. I know that the Marlins fans want Marlins to go out and get a closer. Tanner Scott seems to have sort of taken over that closer spot, but yesterday he had everybody kind of on the edge of their seat. Was he going to mess up Sandy's gem? If the Marlins don't go out and trade for a closer, but they trade from their bullpen, there's a number of guys in their system already, particularly left-handed relievers, that could very well make the call. And some of these guys, Marlins fans need to be familiar with, because these are guys that are probably going to be on the roster at some point sooner rather than later. Okay. Now, 2 of these guys are at AAA Jacksonville, and another one is at AA Pensacola at the moment. But we're talking about Andrew Nardi, a left-handed pitcher who the Marlins drafted in 2009 out of Arizona. He's pitched really, really well. He's actually split time between AAA and AA. George Soriano is another AAA arm. Kim Ng mentioned him specifically in a recent media availability, talking about, some of the prospects that have caught her eye. And then Josh Simpson is another left-hander. He's currently at the AA level. He was a 32nd round draft pick out of Columbia in 2019. We bring up these arms because these are guys that are pitching really, really well, high in the system, and each one of them is either already Rule 5 eligible, which is the case with Soriano, or with the case of Nardi and Simpson, both of them will be Rule 5 eligible this coming December. So the Marlins, if they want to hang on to these guys, will have to add them to the 40-man roster at some point. But these are guys that could very well plug the gap or fill a role should the Marlins trade from their current bullpen sort of makeup, or if another one of those relievers go down, because we have seen some injuries in the bullpen. What do you think of any of these guys, Joe?
Yeah, I was reaching out to some people that I trust, some of my insiders, and I asked, who's legit, and Nardi's name came back legit, Simpson legit, Soriano legit. So it's not just names that, here are big league ready guys, because I've covered plenty of those guys that come up with 70 ERAs and they go away. These guys look like they can help the Marlins in 2022. And, like I said, Nardi, 16th rounder in 19 from Arizona. I look at, first thing I always look at on these guys, Ks and walks and innings pitch, and that whip he has of 0.87. So he's a strike thrower. 58 Ks in 39 innings. And, that tells me a lot. Soriano, the right-hander, I've seen on backfields from time to time, he's been in the system, he's 23 years old. Interesting guy, because he could be like a Eliezer, when, David, to me, let's say you do move Eliezer. If you trade Eliezer, there's a 40-man spot.
Yeah.
And I don't think Eliezer's a headliner, but if you do trade Anthony Bass, you might package him with Eliezer. Now you got 2 40-man spots. And, a guy like Soriano feels that kind of, because 18 games, I think he has 6 starts and 2 saves. So, here's a guy in 44 innings, 56 Ks, 139 whip at AAA. That's not bad. It's not outstanding, but not bad. But a guy like that, who's kind of that Swiss Army knife, can start long relief, and then he can close a game if you need him from time to time. And Simpson's my favorite of the group, because Ivy Leaguer, David, here's a guy, 32nd rounder. You got to pull for that, right? 24 years old, 62 Ks and 36 2/3 innings. So, credit to the Marlins amateur draft department, DJ Svilick and company. They go up, they're probably, asking him all sorts of physics questions and so forth. And he kind of broke down how he throws a slider, I'm sure. But so interesting guy. And Simpson, I think we kind of mentioned him a couple of times. I didn't go into any depth with him, but he was a name, when we mentioned Jan, who's still also in that mix. Jeffrey Jan, but he's a guy, electric arm, but can control issues. So a guy those guys are all legit. Another guy to keep an eye on, I think he's up at AAA as well, Robert Garcia, 2017 15th rounder for the Kansas City Royals at UC Davis, University of California at Davis. He's another guy that kind of could be in this mix that we're talking about. But your chart kind of hit on three names that might hit the big leagues a little faster. But don't be shocked if some of these names were mentioned. And Huskar Brazabana, 32 years old. He's another guy. He's at AAA. What I think he pitched in the big leagues in 2012. He's like been like 4 times to the big leagues since 2012. He's 32. He's got a track record, and guys like that sometimes find their way to the big leagues if there's you need arms. You're gonna because David, you're gonna have a half a year of innings to log, and you're gonna need as many of these arms as you can to get you where you want to go.
Absolutely, and Brazoban might be one of those taxi squad guys that we've seen the Marlins pull in the past. Simpson, I wanted to note on Simpson, his 44.2 K rate leads the Southern League right now. His K per 9 innings, 15.6 strikeouts per 9 innings. That one also leads the Southern League. Second in the Southern League right now is the guy that we talked about last week, Jeffrey Yan. He is second in both of those categories. He's got a K rate of 35.7 and a strikeouts per 9 at 14.8. So the Marlins have some really, really interesting young bullpen arms, and should they trade from their major league stock, many of these guys can sort of get a shot and fill in some of these roles. I mean, we've seen other guys get the call and have some success already. Jimmy Yacobonis has pitched really well.
Yep.
We saw what Okert has been able to do, although they pulled him from the Giants system, obviously. But, these guys, Nardi, Soriano, Simpson, these are valuable guys to have in the system. They've all had success in the upper minors. Nardi has actually flown through the system. They drafted him in 2019. He was in low A ball in 2021. To start last season, he was in low A ball. Right now, less than 2 years later, he is pitching out of the bullpen at the AAA level. He has some closing experience. He's 2 for 4 in save opportunities so far with Jacksonville. Soriano, as you mentioned, also has some closing experience. So these are interesting arms that the Marlin fan really wants to keep an eye on. Again, if the Marlins want to hold on to these guys, by the end of this season, moving into the next, these guys will have to be added to the 40-man roster to protect them from getting poached in the Rule 5 draft. So one way or another, the Marlins are either going to call them up to see them play, or they're going to add them to the roster in the offseason. I mean, maybe they're a swing piece in a trade, because these guys have a great deal of value. If the Marlins are in it and they're buyers and they want to bring back a frontline closer, or they want to bring back a center fielder or whatever, maybe one of these guys is used as one of the prospect pieces going out as part of the package. We talked about the manipulation of the roster and what the Marlins are doing. And we've talked about some of the needs that the Marlins have had. We've mentioned closer several times. We know that center field has been an issue in the past. Marlins recently signed Billy Hamilton. He played for like a second in Jacksonville, but then they called him up. We all knew he was going to end up on the 40-man roster sooner rather than later because of his MLB experience. He's currently with the team, but he's a guy that sort of took the spot that we saw Gerard Encarnacion kind of hold on to. Since Encarnacion got sent back down, he's actually kind of struggled. He's only hitting 162 in the 10 games since he's gone back to Jacksonville, but he has a 192 BABIP, batting average with balls put in play. So some bad luck in there, but he's currently on an 0 for 14 skid, is Encarnacion, going into today's game. So
what's his K over that stretch? I hate to interrupt.
The K rate is actually 26.8%.
Okay, so he's not striking out all the time.
It's not right. It's not like going in a completely different direction. That's basically in line with his season average. But the other guy that the Marlins have talked about, or Marlins fans rather, have talked about quite a bit in terms of the outfield and the next prospect to get the call, is JJ Bleday. Now, people have been frustrated that they haven't seen him get the call yet, and he has had sort of an up and down season. He's currently on the upswing, so to speak, because over his last 26 games, he's 25 for 92. He's got a 950 OPS. He has 8 homers, 3 doubles, 22 RBI, 16 walks, 16 runs scored. He's got a very, very manageable 22% K rate. For the season, he's only hitting 228, but he's got an 828 OPS. That shouldn't say 1 home run. That should say 17 home runs. Sorry, typo there. And those 17 home runs are actually third most in the International League. Right now, he led the International League with home runs in June. He hit 9 of them. He also has the third most walks in the International League for the season. So he's been really, really productive despite not having the batting average that you want to see. He's still getting on base. He's still a very productive bat in the middle of that order. And when you look at, the Marlins sort of 40-man roster and the prospects and who's next, I know Encarnacion's on the 40-man roster currently, but if Bleday continues to hit in this way, they've got to give him a look at some point, right? Don't you think?
I think if they're in it, JJ's probably not part of the plan. If August goes south and they're way out of it, then I think you're probably going to look at Bleday. I don't think he's going to be looked at between now and August 2nd as one of their fixes. I think they're going to just let him kind of settle into being a more consistent offensive player. And keep this in mind, injuries right now are impacting the Marlins' direction. Like they're a little hesitant, if it may be the wrong word, but unsure what Jazz and Soler, how long they're going to be out. They're trying to figure out the map of your outfield to get you into the playoff push in the second half. So I think, like I said, if the season's not looking good, there's pressure off JJ to perform immediately. But I don't think, he hasn't dominated the league by any stretch. That, I don't think it's fair to him to expect him to come up and carry the team in a postseason because he had a good month of June. I usually look to see if guys big league ready, they dominate a level. CJ Abrams has dominated levels. That's why he's in the big leagues at 21. Riley Green has dominated why he's in the big leagues at 21. And so Bleday is constantly finding his footing. So I still am thinking, let Bleday do his thing. From the Marlins point of view, there might be another option. I mean, if Jazz is back, John Birdie may be in the outfield more. You know what I mean? There's pieces that they have. Dela Cruz is being given a shot, and he's hit some big homers. I personally don't think it's fair to JJ to say, hey, come and save the year just because. Why not? But again, like I said, if it falls apart and they're out of it, this is where baseball losing that second trade. Remember the old waiver trade, the non-waiver trade back a few years back. Because now the Marlins, keep in mind, and that's why I think they're being very guarded and not wanting to overplay their hand and say they're in it. I still look at it, David, as they're in for the 6th and final spot. Because the Braves and the Mets, I don't know if the Marlins are going to finish 20 over or 15 over. The Dodgers and the Padres, again, maybe the Padres fall closer to 500. But, those two are probably – the Dodgers won't be – they'll be well over 10 or 15 over. The Padres probably will be too. The Giants have fallen back to earth. They're actually the Marlins in striking distance, which leaves to me the Central. Well, Milwaukee's kind of got their hands on it right now, but the Cardinals have been a little bit of a slide, but they're playing very tough teams right now. To me, they're better than that, and they will look to add. So I think you're realistically looking at one playoff spot, and that being the case, I'm being very cautious with JJ Bleday because I'm looking at JJ Bleday in 23 and forward and hoping that he's putting it together to be a regular big league outfielder and a productive one. So I think with him, you have to look at him with a much wider lens than just get him up here now because he's hot. And I'd rather have JJ in my lineup than Billy the Hamilton because you might overexpose him early when he's not fully ready in meaningful games. So that's just my 2 cents on JJ right now. Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see how they deal with him as the season rolls on, right? I mean, another name. I mean, there's several names that we didn't really mention or get into today. I mean, Peyton Burdick is obviously another guy in that outfield mix, but he's probably behind Bleday in terms of like the pecking order. But beyond that, obviously, we've talked about Lewin Diaz in the past. He's kind of lingering there on the cusp as somebody who could help the team. But he's still doing well in Jacksonville. And then we also know that Jose Devers is on the 40-man roster. I think he traveled with the Marlins at one point when kind of the middle infield had that real rash of injuries. I think when Rojas missed some time, he didn't get into a game, but he's not necessarily performing well right now. He's hitting 175 at the AA level. So you're going to want to see more consistency from him, and so how the Marlins sort of deal with this moving forward, the bats, I think health is a major part of what's going to happen moving forward, because if they're comfortable with the lineup when it's healthy as constructed, maybe then Bleday doesn't get the call, maybe Lewin doesn't get the call, and then they focus more on the pitching depth and looking at the bullpen as a spot to add. That's probably where they go first, and then kind of take it from there. But it's certainly going to be interesting to see how this all develops and unfolds for the Marlins. We will keep you up to date with what's going on with the prospects. We will let you know who's really sort of popping in the system and what we're hearing as we're getting closer and closer to really an important stretch. I mean, we're in an important stretch for the Marlins right now, leading into the All-Star break, coming out of the All-Star break. We also have the MLB draft this month. And then at the end of the month, we'll be talking trade deadline moving into August. So, this is a pivotal point in the season for the Marlins, and we've got you covered here on the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you check out the scroll down below, dugoutmugs.com/man-on-2nd to get your hands on one of these nifty cups. You can get it like Joe has it. There's also the wooden bat that's kind of engraved. I have one of those at home. So if you get your hands, or if you're interested in getting one of those, make sure you use the link below. That helps us out. If there's anybody that you would like us to talk about in future episodes, you can leave a comment down below. You can reach out on social media. You can find me on Twitter at @DL_Fernandez. Joe is at man-on-2nd on Twitter. He's also at Joe Frisaro on Twitter. Joe will be at the game covering it today at the second of the 2 games versus the Angels for the Marlins today. I'm actually going to be out there as a fan today since I'm in town for the weekend. So it'll be fun to watch some Marlins baseball. And sooner rather than later, a lot of these prospects that we've been talking about will be on the roster performing for the Marlins. Until then, we will keep you up to date on what's going on with the system. If you're interested in learning about any of these guys or wanting to hear our opinions on any of these guys, just tag us, reach out at some point on social media, and we will get into those guys in a future episode. For Joe, I'm David. Thanks for watching, everybody.